I recently read an article giving digital photographers 5 reasons to go back to film. And there were a few points in that article that can and shall be debated. But one that really stood out to me is this. Enhance. Many of my viewers and fellow film shooters will know exactly what the author means by the right places. The usual mix of garage sales, thrift stores, online marketplaces like Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, even eBay occasionally, not as much as it used to be, but still possible. And sure enough, all of those are very useful and valid ways of acquiring film photography equipment. And I personally purchased something for my film photography through each one of them. Of course, the biggest attraction of thrift stores, garage sales, and the like is the possibility of finding something decent at an extremely low price. Because let's face it, everyone likes a good deal. Everyone online likes a good deal even harder. In fact, everyone likes a good deal so much that sometimes it can feel like bargain hunting has become the default way of purchasing film photography equipment. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Is bargain hunting going to save film photography, or is it going to be film photography's downfall? Let's talk about it. I'm Leo Nikishin, this is 10 Rolls of Film. Let's do this. Now, before we dive in and talk about various positive and negative aspects of bargain hunting, there is something very important that I would like to outline. For film photography to survive, and hopefully even thrive, both as an industry and as a community, we fundamentally need 3 main components, 3 pillars, if you like. First and foremost, we need people. Of course we do. We need more people shooting film so that it makes sense for manufacturers to keep producing film and all the supplies, accessories, and chemicals needed for processing it. Ideally, we want our community not to just stay the same, but to grow and expand, because it will make the community more interesting, more diverse, and it will also make the industry more appealing, both to the existing manufacturers and to potential newcomers. We particularly want more younger people to start shooting film, people that didn't necessarily grow up with film, unlike the older generations. And now let me make this absolutely clear. Even if you personally don't like youngsters or hipsters or someone that shoots on auto or someone that doesn't print their negatives, does not matter. If you shoot film and you want to continue doing so, it is in your interest that more people shoot film. It's as simple as that. Second, we need supplies. Also quite obvious. We need the film itself, of course, and we also need all the chemicals and accessories we need to shoot and process it. So again, we need manufacturers to continue doing their thing. Finally, we need film cameras. And that is where things get a bit tricky. Because if you look at the current film camera production, you will notice that there is a bit of a gap. If you want a niche camera, camera designed for a specific application that is a bit outside the mainstream film photography, then you are probably covered. Pinhole cameras of all shapes and sizes, large format cameras, panoramic cameras, stereo cameras, the list goes on and on. And I think the amount of innovation and ingenuity that is displayed in those fields is amazing, and I really salute all the manufacturers that are doing it. But if you just want a simple, well, relatively simple, straightforward 35mm or maybe medium format SLR or a rangefinder with interchangeable optics and a reasonable amount of exposure control, then you are sort of out of luck. Unless you can pony up the money to buy one of the currently produced Leicas. And that creates a problem, because it means that by far the most in-demand types of film cameras are not currently produced. If you can't buy them new, you're going to have to buy them secondhand, and that's just as well, because obviously film cameras have been produced for well over a century at this point, and especially since the 1960s or so, they have been produced in truly staggering numbers. So there's definitely plenty of film cameras to go around. However, this pool of second-hand film cameras is finite because it's not being replenished with newly produced cameras, which means that, every day, somewhere, somehow, a film camera breaks beyond repair or is just thrown into the garbage, and the pool gets smaller. With that third point in mind, I'm going to add a fourth pillar to the foundation of film photography as a community and industry: camera technicians. Because if our cameras break, we can't just go out and buy a new one. So we need people with skills and experience and knowledge and specialized equipment to repair and service our cameras, so that this pool of film cameras does not shrink any faster than it has to. Now that we outlined this general picture, let's talk about bargain hunting. And we will start with the positive aspects. They are really quite obvious. 1. When buying a camera from a garage sale or a thrift store or something like that, you may very well save that camera from going into a landfill. Because, when someone maybe finds a camera or inherits one, there is often a very narrow time window in which they will try to sell the camera, after which, off to the dumpster it goes. And sometimes it's the same story with thrift stores, because those are businesses. They need to sell things to keep running, and if something doesn't sell, sooner or later we'll have to make space for something that might. So there is definitely a rescue aspect to bargain hunting, and it becomes especially important when you remember about that shrinking camera pool. 2. Having the possibility of purchasing film photography equipment on a very low budget opens the doors of film photography to a much wider demographic than would otherwise be possible. It may also encourage more well-off people to give film a try, because the initial investment is lower, so they might not feel like they're risking much in case they don't like it. There may be some sense of disillusionment later on when they realize just how high the running costs of shooting film can get, but still, having the option of entering film photography on a lower budget is a welcome one. Now let's talk about the negative aspects of bargain hunting. And really there is just one, but it is a biggie. You see, we may know the true market value of something, say a camera, but our perception of its value will always be affected by how much we actually paid for the darn thing. So if you scored a Nikon FM for $5 at a thrift store, you may know that it's actually worth more like $100. But no matter, somewhere at the back of your brain there will be a little note saying that this camera is worth $5. The only time when this note will shut the hell up is, of course, when the time comes to sell the camera. For all the glorious social media posts about bargain finds, I've yet to see a single one where someone was like, yay, I passed the bargain price right on, made someone else just as happy as I was, good job me. And a similar note can form at the back of your brain if you see and hear enough people talk about how they found Nikon FM for $5. And if people do find a bargain like that, rest assured, you'll hear about it. We are simple creatures and we can hardly keep it in our pants if a great deal falls into our lap. So there's hardly a bigger like and comment magnet in Facebook photography groups and Instagram than posts about spectacular bargain finds. You bought a Hasselblad for its normal going price? Good for you, go get a cookie. You found a Hasselblad for $50 at a garage sale? Oh my god, that is the best thing ever! Posts like that get disproportionately more attention and traction, further amplified by algorithms of social media and YouTube and such. And together they combine to create this illusion of film photography as some sort of bargain Eldorado. They create the notion that film camera must be cheap. Now, I hear you say, Leo, isn't that a good thing? Don't we want film cameras to be cheap? To which the consumer in me wants to say, yes, sure, we want the cameras to be cheap, But it's more complicated than that in reality. Consider this. If you are using a film camera with manual focus, full exposure control, and a decently fast, maybe an interchangeable lens, then your camera is actually quite a complex piece of engineering and manufacturing that could never be, and certainly was never intended to be, anywhere near as cheap as thrift store price tags would make you believe. Just to give you an idea, I have this Pentor Super TL camera, which is really just a Praktica Super TL rebranded for the Dutch market. And Prakticas are exactly the kind of camera that pop up in thrift stores fairly frequently for next to nothing, anywhere between 5 to maybe 20 euro, thereabouts. Now, here's the fun part. I dug up an old advert for this camera, and apparently, back in 1969, you could buy it in the US with a 50mm lens, which is the one I have, for under $140, which I assume just means $139.99. Now, if we convert that amount into 2021 money, taking inflation into account, then we end up with a price tag of just over $1,000. In the current digital camera market, that's firmly in the mid-range, not low end at all. And mind you, this is an East German Praktica, and Prakticas were known for competing mostly on price, which means that the comparable models from Japanese and West German manufacturers were even more expensive. How much did I pay for my Praktica? 15 euro. Now, on one hand, yay. Something that used to be a fairly expensive device can be had for a very low price. But on the other hand, you know how it's a common wisdom that even if you have the money to buy an old supercar, you shouldn't really do that because chances are with all the running costs and repairs, that camera will burn through your savings faster than it accelerates. Well, it's a little bit the same story with cameras, although at a different angle. But it's the same in terms of relation between purchase cost and the repair cost. Many camera technicians will have a flat standard rate that they charge for standard repairs and servicing of cameras, which is usually called CLA, clean, lubricate, and adjust. So pretty much any repair that doesn't require replacing parts. From a repairman's perspective, there isn't a whole lot in between servicing a Zenit and a Leica in terms of the time it takes, in terms of equipment needed, and in terms of effort. So it may seem bizarre to us that they would charge the same, but they often do. Now let's say that our imaginary camera repairman charges, well, let's say $100 for a standard CLA. Now, you tell me, who is more likely to justify spending that kind of money on repairing or servicing the camera that they've shot with maybe for a few years? Someone who paid perfectly reasonable $100 for a Nikon FM, let's circle to our example from the beginning, or someone who scored Nikon FM for $5 at a thrift store. Now, to be fair, there is no hard data on this. There is no market research on this whatsoever, but just judging from how human psychology tends to work, I think we can guess. Now, to be clear, I do not begrudge anyone who is not willing to spend 20 times what they paid for the camera to get it serviced. I've been lucky with my Praktica so far, but if it breaks, I'll probably either give it away to a camera technician, hoping that they revive it and pass it on, or I'll just keep it as a shelf queen. And I don't think camera technicians are overcharging either, because, as I mentioned, even cameras that we think of as relatively basic are actually quite complex. As anyone who's ever tried to repair their own camera will tell you, once you get past obvious repairs like changing light seals and cleaning viewfinders, things get tricky real fast. So I think they charge, for the most part, fairly. And okay, sometimes there are expensive ones, for example, repairmen certified by Leica, but well, if you're choosing their services, then you know why you need them, because they preserve the value of your camera and so on. So you get what you pay for. Another case where we can clearly see this discrepancy between how cheap we want our cameras to be and how actually complex they are to design and manufacture is whenever someone or a company of some sort is trying to bring a new film camera to market, especially if it's a camera with a built-in shutter, because shutters tend to be the most complex part to manufacture and to design. Every single time this happens, by far the most common response is, why would we pay so much for a new camera if there is a multitude of second-hand options already available that do exactly the same thing and cost way, way less? And well, you remember how that Praktica was costing over $1,000 in today's money back when it was new? There's your answer. A new camera can't and won't be anywhere near as cheap as we want. Because what we want and what we got with bargain hunting culture is unrealistic. But really, the scenario in which bargain hunting can probably do the most damage is when someone on film photography groups on Facebook inevitably asks the classic question: what is a good film camera for a beginner on a relatively limited budget? And without fault, there will be at least a few responses along the lines of, man, you should hit the thrift stores in your area and find an SLR with a lens for under $20. And naturally, those are the responses that the person asking the question will naturally gravitate to because they promise the best deal and the lowest initial investment. Now, let me explain why this can be bad news. Let's say that this someone, let's call him Dennis, follows the advice, goes and checks out thrift stores in his area, and let's say that he gets lucky and he does find an SLR with a 50mm lens for under $20. Great. Now, there are two possible paths from this point. Scenario number one. Dennis gets the camera and the lens, gets the film, shoots it, sends it out to get it developed and scanned, gets the scans back, everything worked as it should, he likes the results, he likes the camera, Dennis is now hooked on film and lives happily ever after. Great story all round. Scenario number two. Dennis, who, I must remind you, does not know anything about film cameras or how they work or how to test them or anything like that, goes out, buys a camera and a lens for $20 in a thrift store, buys film for probably another $5, gets the film developed and scanned, I'm guessing another $15, and then he gets the scans back, and lo and behold, there are weird vertical lines on every frame. Naturally, Dennis goes back to the film photography group on Facebook and asks the logical question: what is this? And sure enough, the same people who recommended that he goes to thrift stores are now commenting saying, oh, clearly this is a capping shutter. Can I fix it myself? Asks Dennis. No, shutters are difficult to repair and complex, so you should send your camera out to repair. Is it expensive? Well, that depends, of course, but let's say that Dennis gets lucky. And first of all, he finds a repairman or repairwoman in his town, so at least he doesn't need to deal with postage and delays related to that and so on. And let's say that the camera technician in his town is being generous and wants to ask only $50 for repairing the shutter of Dennis's camera. Now, imagine being Dennis at this point. He is $40 down the drain. He has a broken camera. And now he gets told that he needs to spend another $50 to get the camera that he already owns working. The camera that, must I remind you, cost him $20 with a lens. Now, it's possible that Dennis will think, well, you know what, this is just part of the thing. You have to do what you have to do. He'll pony up the money and get the camera repaired, and we'll sort of get back on track of the scenario number one. Great. But it's quite likely that at this point, Dennis will just quit. And honestly, I don't blame him at all. Remember those 4 pillars of film photography community and industry that I mentioned in the beginning? Well, think about them now. because as a community, we lost Dennis, meaning that there are fewer people shooting film. Manufacturers also lose because he will not be buying any more film or supplies or chemicals or anything like that. It's likely that he will either just throw away the camera in frustration, or maybe he will try to just, sell it off for peanuts without getting it repaired, which doesn't bode well for the camera. It needs to be quite lucky to end up in the hands of a willing technician or someone who can venture into repairing the camera themselves. So there is a pretty decent chance that this camera will leave the pool of functioning film cameras. Finally, because of the cognitive dissonance between the purchase cost of the camera and the CLA quote that Dennis got, which was, by the way, generous, he's not bringing any more business to the camera technician either. In other words, we all lose. Now, of course, this is the worst case scenario, but it does happen, and I think as a community we need and should do better preventing these. So what should you do if someone comes up to you and asks where they can buy a film camera, or if you see someone asking that on a film photography group? Well, if it's in your area, why not join them? It will be fun, it will be an adventure, and if you have the knowledge and experience with film cameras, you will be able to help them make a more informed choice, hopefully help them test some basic things on the spot before they spend the money, and so on. If that's not possible, then why not direct them to something like KEH in the US, or other known dealers in the UK and also in continental Europe. There are a few. Because, of course, they won't be getting the bargain of the century. But chances are they won't be getting the disappointment of the century either. I feel that professional camera dealers sometimes get a bit too much flack for having noticeably higher prices than things like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and thrift stores and stuff like that. And I feel like it's not quite fair. Think about it. Think about the 4 pillars of film photography community and industry that I mentioned in the beginning. A professional and decent dealer, or a good one, not all of them, but the good ones. They test the cameras that they sell because they have a reputation to maintain, meaning that person buying from them is unlikely to get disappointed and is unlikely to stop shooting film because of that. Then they also fix the cameras that they sell, meaning that the camera pool does not shrink any quicker on their account. And finally, more often than not, professional camera dealers are either skilled technicians themselves, or they outsource repairs to a professional camera repairer. Either way, it means that a technician gets a steady flow of work coming their way, and they can, continue doing their thing, and we can continue getting our cameras repaired by them. If you have the knowledge and the experience, and if you are prepared to either fix things yourself if something goes wrong, or are prepared for the costs of getting things repaired by a professional technician, then of course, thrift stores, garage sales, and all that stuff can be so much fun. Of course, it's an adventure. There is so much adrenaline involved and excitement. It's sort of a camera equivalent of gambling in a sense. Of course, but it cannot be the default way that we buy film photography equipment, because it creates a false sense of value, or sense of lack of value, I guess. Sense of lack of value. Jeez, that doesn't sound like English at all, but you know what I mean. And also, it cannot be the route that we send all the newcomers on, because we are sort of setting them up for a disaster. So these were just my thoughts and mumblings on the subject of bargain hunting. What do you think? What your experience with bargain hunting has been like? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Did you have spectacular bargain finds? Did you have disappointments? I want to hear all of those. Leave them down in the comments and let's have a conversation about this. Thank you so much for watching till the very end of this video. Impressive. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Each one of those things is really appreciated and helps me grow this channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Till the next roll of film.